Good morning. Just look at all those happy faces brimming with expectation and anticipation. Well, let's see what I've pulled together to inspire you this morning. Stories. Stories. There are stories that entertain us, there are stories that teach us, and every once in a while there's a story that quietly becomes part of us. For me, the original Star Trek series has always been one of those stories. Now I know some of you might be thinking, a sermon about Star Trek, really? But stay with me, because the Star Trek saga was more than entertainment. It was theology in disguise. It was a moral vision wrapped in stories about strange new worlds and alien civilizations. At its heart, it was about the same things that we gather here to explore each week. What does it mean to be human? How do we build a beloved community? What is our responsibility to one another and to the world we inhabit? So fasten your seatbelts and let me take you on a journey. For years, I simply enjoyed the lore of Star Trek. Then one day, I found myself asking a different question. Why has this series stayed with me for so long? The show's special effects were nothing special, even by 1966 standards. So what was it? Why did this old television show continue to speak to me decade after decade? Eventually, my curiosity led me to the man who created it, Gene Roddenberry. And that's when something clicked. I realized that Roddenberry wasn't really making a show about outer space at all. He was inviting us to imagine what humanity might become if we learned to trust curiosity more than fear, to value cooperation over conquest, and to believe that profoundly different people could build a better future together. Once I understood that, I could never watch the show in quite the same way again. What fascinated me even more was the discovery of how Roddenberry managed to share that vision by overcoming many network-imposed obstacles. Roddenberry, who was the head writer for both Wagon Train and The Lieutenant, constantly wrangled with the network censors as he tried to weave socially conscious themes into the shows. As the final season of the hugely popular Wagon Train series was winding down, Roddenberry needed to pitch a new show to the network executives to stay employed. He understood something that storytellers have known for centuries. If you lead with an argument, people instinctively prepare a rebuttal. If you lead with a story, they lean in. Roddenberry realized that outer space was the ideal setting to ask very earthly questions. What does prejudice do to us? What does it mean to lead with integrity? Can people who are profoundly different learn to trust each other? What kind of future are we creating together? He wasn't trying to predict the evolution of our technology. He was asking what kind of people we might become. And that's a very different mission. So he pitched Wagon Train to the Stars. I've come to think of Star Trek as kind of a Trojan horse. On the outside, there were starships, alien worlds, adventures, exploration. On the inside, there were questions about justice, about dignity, about fear, about hope. By employing that setting and structure, Roddenberry reached millions of viewers while addressing such topics as racism, prejudice, war, class conflict, nationalism, and even xenophobia. Topics that network censors would never have permitted to be included on a show set on Earth. Most people tuned in expecting an hour of entertainment, and without quite realizing it, they spent an hour reflecting on themselves. That may have been Roddenberry's greatest achievement. He didn't tell people what to think. He invited them to imagine. And imagination has always been one of the greatest drivers of change, because before we can build a better future, we have to be able to imagine one. Roddenberry understood that intuitively, and he built the need to search for wisdom into everyone on that bridge. As I've grown older, I'm more convinced that spiritual wisdom is much less rooted in religion and much more deeply rooted in the daily lives we, and those around us, live. While the clergy have historically been regarded as the primary purveyors of spiritual guidance and wisdom, I think that sometimes that role can be admirably filled by someone wearing a blue science officer's uniform, or carrying a medical scanner, or by someone sitting in the captain's chair. When I first watched Star Trek as a teenager, I was captivated by the adventure. There were strange new worlds, impossible creatures, alien civilizations. The Enterprise was always going somewhere no one had ever gone before. And that was enough for me. But something curious has happened over the years. I've come to realize that in many cases, the true joys of life are not found in the destinations that we seek, but rather are woven into the stories of the journeys that we take. One of the reasons I love landscape photography is that it teaches me just that. As I prepare for a trip, I study the area, I study the camera, I study composition. But with all that preparation in place, when I'm out in the field hiking up a trail to a waterfall or a mountain overlook, none of that matters if I'm not open to truly seeing the world around me. Getting great images requires flexibility and adaptability. Where should I stand? Do I need to be patient for the light to shift or for an animal to move? Or do I need to include that beautiful clump of flowers just in front of me in the foreground of the image? I may have come to photograph a mountain or a waterfall, but by being open to possibility, I might find an amazing shot of the roots of a fallen tree, or a family of banana slugs inching their way along the forest floor, or a couple sharing an intimate moment together, or someone simply sitting on a rock in quiet contemplation, which may produce a far more compelling image than the majestic mountain or waterfall that I was originally seeking. As I chat with folks who move much faster along those trails than I do, I like to gently remind them that while completing a hiking trail is an accomplishment, the real prize is returning home with a head full of memories of the forest beauty that surrounded you during the hike. To claim that prize, one must open not just one's eyes, but one must open one's spirit and mind to possibility. I think that that's what journeys teach us, whether the trail leads through a redwood forest or across the stars. It isn't the destination that changes us, it's the quality of our attention along the way. Nowadays, when I watch an episode, observing how the crew interacts is of much greater interest to me. Because I've come to believe that the real miracle of the Enterprise isn't warp drive, it's community. Think about that command bridge for a moment. Captain Kirk, Spock, Dr. McCoy, Scotty, Uhura, Sulu, Chekhov. Talk about diversity. Different planets, different cultures, different personalities, all working in concert, building on a foundation of individual talents, strengths, and capacities. For those of us in the 21st century, where some in power and their followers find it perfectly fine to demonize and dehumanize their fellow humans based on where they come from, or the color of their skin, or how one is meant to be perceived in the world, the idea that the Enterprise's diverse 23rd century crew could function with such grace and cohesion might seem to be the most amazing aspect of the story. The crew was quite the phenomenal collection of humanity. Kirk, a wild, cocky kid from the American Midwest Corn Belt, trusted his instincts and moral compass to lead the crew and face the weak situation. Spock, half human, half Vulcan, the conflicted offspring of an interplanetary couple, used science and reason to guide his way through the universe, which he found to be a much easier task than navigating the challenges of dealing with the interpersonal relationships encountered during a long-duration trek through the stars. McCoy, with his folksy country doctor persona, trusted his innate, compassionate heart to care for the crew and to share his wise counsel with the command team. The indomitable spirit and irascible Scotty was literally the engine that saved the day time and time again. Dear Uhura, she listened more carefully than anyone else on the ship. She understood that communication wasn't merely about transmitting information. It was all about building understanding and relationships with the sentient life forms that they encountered, corporeal or not. Of course, many other key members of the ensemble cast deserve recognition and exploration, but my limited time with you this morning prevents me from giving each the attention that they deserve. Each week as the crew traversed the universe, each of them could only understand part of the challenges they faced in that episode. They depended on each other to see the complete picture and to leverage their combined talents to create the most elegant solution possible. Solutions that were rarely perfect, occasionally terribly flawed, sometimes flouting the prime directive, but always the best that they were capable of undertaking within the scope of their knowledge and their humanity. That strikes me as one of the most hopeful visions of the future ever presented on TV. The true strength of the enterprise didn't come from everyone thinking the same way. It came from everyone bringing something different. While they were generally a happy, collegial crew, there were, of course, moments of crew conflict. When that happened, they argued, sometimes passionately, but always with respect and dignity. Spock and McCoy disagreed so often that their exchanges became part of the rhythm of the series. McCoy would accuse Spock of being cold. Spock would quietly point out the flaws in Dr. McCoy's emotional reasoning. Neither one ever convinced the other. And yet, they kept talking. Neither walked away. Neither decided that the relationship wasn't worth the effort. They chose to remain curious about and stay engaged with one another. That sounds a lot like an intergalactic covenant to me. Kirk rarely solved problems by ignoring either of them. He listened, he weighed, he questioned, and then he made the best decision that he could with the wisdom available at the time. That's what they call leadership. From personal experience, I know that being a great leader isn't always about knowing all the answers. It's often a lot more about knowing the right questions to ask. Having the humility to gather wisdom from many voices before choosing a path is the hallmark of great leadership. You know, that feels deeply you to me. For we are not a people of easy answers. We are a people of shared discernment, of listening, of questioning, of trusting that truth is usually larger than any one of us can see on our own. As I've grown older and wiser, the more I admire the bridge crew. Not because everyone was brilliant, for they certainly were. Not because everybody was courageous, for they certainly were. I admire them because they never expected any single person to carry the entire mission alone. The mission belonged to all of them. When I reflect on it, that feels deeply you to me. People from many different backgrounds, guided by principles, who pull together to make a difference in the world. I've come to think of that as the hallmark of a healthy congregational community. You know, I've always found myself especially drawn to Spock. When I was younger, I admired his intellect. Now I admire his courage. People often describe Spock as emotionless. I don't think that that's true. I believe Spock feels deeply. His loyalty is profound. His friendships are genuine. His love for his crewmates is unmistakable. What makes him remarkable isn't his apparent absence of emotions. It is his lifelong commitment to understanding them. Spock spends his life living between two worlds. He never fully belongs to either one. Spock's Vulcan side is relentlessly drawn to logic, while at the same time his human side persistently pulls at his spirit to explore the richness and unpredictability of being human. He never completely resolves that tension. Perhaps he isn't supposed to. Because isn't that where most of us live? Some days we trust our heads and some days we trust our hearts, but of course the most important decisions that we make in our lives ask us to honor both. The world often tells us we must choose one side or another. Spock quietly, defiantly refuses. He shows us that wisdom doesn't come from removing tension. He shows us that wisdom is found in learning to live faithfully within it. I think that one reason so many people love him and continue to love and respect him is that he gives us permission to be wonderfully unfinished, still learning, still growing, still becoming. That invitation to be wonderfully unfinished is really at the heart of everything that the Enterprise crew has to teach us. The crew of the Enterprise keeps choosing to look again, to ask another question, to remain curious just a little longer. And perhaps that is one of the holiest choices that a human can make. Because curiosity begins with humility. It quietly says, I don't know everything. I think that there's more to this person than I can see right now. Those are sacred words, not because they give us certainty, but because they keep us open. The Enterprise crew was not extraordinary because it was flawless. It was extraordinary because learning was built into their DNA. Curiosity made growth possible. Growth made hope believable. Of course, our lives work much the same way. None of us arrives fully formed. None of us ever finishes learning. The person I was 60 years ago could not see the world as I see it today. I hope the person I become in my remaining years will not look back and cringe at the limits of this poor mortal who stands before you this morning. Curiosity keeps opening doors that we didn't even know were there. Every potential relationship invites us to become more curious. Every encounter with someone whose experience is different from ours invites us to become more fully human. Not because curiosity always leads to agreement. Sometimes it doesn't. But it frequently leads to understanding. And understanding is where compassion begins. What I find most spiritually compelling about Star Trek is its fundamental optimism. Its insistence that humanity can evolve, can grow, and that we have the ability to become better people. I think that the greatest strength of our Unitarian Universalist tradition is that we are not asked to check our minds at the door. We are invited to bring our whole selves, our questions, our doubts, our convictions, and most of all, our stories. We trust that truth is not diminished by honest inquiry. Truth and our lives are enriched by it. It doesn't mean every question has an answer. Some questions become companions for a lifetime. But there's wisdom in continuing to ask them. There is grace in remaining teachable. There is hope in believing that tomorrow we may understand what we cannot understand today. Perhaps that's why the opening words of the Star Trek saga continue to resonate after all these years. To seek out new life. For a long time, I assumed those words referred to distant planets. Now I hear them differently. New life is not only waiting somewhere beyond the stars. New life begins every time we become a little more curious than fearful, a little more compassionate than certain, a little bit more willing to listen than to judge. Every conversation offers that possibility, every relationship. Star Trek invites us to keep trying, to boldly go into an uncertain future with hope, with courage, and with our commitment to keep our values intact. The future isn't fixed, dear friends. It's being written by us right now, right here. By the choices we make, by the bridges that we build or burn, the welcome that we extend or withhold. Star Trek dared to imagine a better world, but imagination without action is just fantasy. The real work happens here, now. In how we treat our neighbors, in how we show up for justice, in how we build the beloved community, one relationship at a time. So, dear ones, let us boldly go into this new week. Let us seek out new understanding. Let us explore the strange new worlds within ourselves and in each other. And let us never stop believing that humanity, flawed, complicated, beautiful humanity, can build a better future for all. Live long and prosper. Blessings. Amen.